You've been carrying around a version of yourself that isn't really you, haven't you? That person you present to the world, the one who says the right things, laughs at the appropriate moments, agrees when disagreement would be uncomfortable. That's not you. That's a carefully constructed mask, what Jung would call your persona, and it's been suffocating the real you for so long that you've forgotten what authentic breath feels like. Nietzsche understood this profound truth when he spoke of becoming who you are. But what he didn't tell you explicitly is that first, the person you think you are must die. Not literally, of course, but psychologically, spiritually, completely. The false self must be stripped away layer by layer until nothing remains but the raw, unpolished truth of your being. But here's what terrifies most people about this process. When that old version of you begins to crumble, you feel like you're losing everything. Your relationships might shift, or even end because you're no longer playing the role they expected. Your career might feel misaligned because you were performing competence in areas that never truly inspired you. Your daily routines might feel hollow because they were designed to maintain an image rather than nourish your soul. This is what Jung called the dark night of the soul, and it's absolutely necessary. You cannot birth your authentic self while still clinging to the comfortable lies of who you thought you were supposed to be. The old you was born from 1,000 compromises, wasn't it? From the moment you learned that love might be conditional, that acceptance required you to be smaller, quieter, more agreeable than your natural instincts demanded. You learned to read the room before you learned to read your own heart. You developed an exquisite sensitivity to what others needed from you while becoming deaf to what you needed for yourself. This is the tragedy of socialization. We learn to survive by abandoning ourselves, and then we wonder why life feels so empty, so performative, so utterly exhausting. Nietzsche called this the herd mentality, this desperate need to blend in, to avoid the discomfort of standing out. But what he understood, and what Jung later expanded upon, is that your individual psychology is infinitely more complex and valuable than any collective expectation. Your shadow, those parts of yourself you've deemed unacceptable, contains not just your capacity for darkness, but also your greatest strengths, your most authentic desires, your deepest creativity, the qualities you've suppressed because they seem too much, too intense, too different. These are often the very qualities that make you uniquely valuable in this world. Think about the last time you felt truly alive. Not happy, not content, but alive. Chances are it was a moment when you dropped the mask, when you spoke your truth regardless of the consequences, when you acted from your core rather than your conditioning. That feeling of aliveness, that's your authentic self breaking through the carefully constructed prison of social acceptability. But then what happened? You probably felt exposed, vulnerable, maybe even ashamed. You quickly put the mask back on, told yourself it was safer that way, more responsible, more mature. But what you were really doing was choosing death over life, comfort over growth, the familiar prison over the uncertain freedom of becoming who you truly are. The death of the old you isn't a one-time event. It's a process, sometimes agonizingly slow, sometimes shockingly sudden. You might find yourself unable to laugh at jokes that once seemed funny because your humor has evolved beyond cruel or superficial amusement. You might discover that conversations that used to energize you now drain you because you've outgrown the need for meaningless social validation. You might realize that you've been saying yes to opportunities that don't align with your values simply because you couldn't bear the thought of disappointing others. This is what individuation feels like. The gradual but irreversible process of becoming more yourself and less like everyone else's expectations. But here's where it gets challenging in a way that neither Nietzsche nor Jung fully prepared us for. When you start living authentically, you become a mirror for everyone around you. Your courage to be real highlights their own masks, and this can trigger intense reactions. Some people will be inspired by your transformation and begin their own journey toward authenticity. Others will feel threatened and may try to pull you back into the old dynamics, the familiar roles, the comfortable lies you used to share. They'll tell you that you've changed, that you're being selfish, that you're not the person they fell in love with or befriended or hired. And they'll be absolutely right. You're not that person anymore. That person had to die for you to be born. The real you is born in those moments when you choose truth over comfort, when you honor your own needs without apology, when you speak from your depth rather than your surface. It's born when you stop trying to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It's born when you realize that your value doesn't depend on external validation, that your worth isn't negotiable, that your authentic expression is more important than maintaining peace at the cost of your soul. This birth is often messy, uncomfortable, sometimes lonely, but it's the only way to experience what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate, love of your entire journey, including the parts that brought you to your knees. You see, the old you was built on the unconscious assumption that you needed to earn love, respect, belonging. You developed strategies, personas, ways of being that you hoped would guarantee acceptance. But what you didn't realize is that any love or acceptance you received while wearing a mask wasn't really for you. It was for the performance. The real you remained unseen, unknown, unloved. This is why authentic relationships can only begin after you've stopped performing for approval. When you show up as you truly are, you might receive less attention, but the attention you do receive will nourish your soul rather than feed your ego. The process of dying to your old self often begins with what Jung called the confrontation with the shadow. You start noticing the ways you've betrayed yourself, the compromises that felt small at the time but accumulated into a life that feels foreign to your spirit. You might feel rage at how much time you've wasted, how many opportunities you've missed because you were too afraid to disappoint others. You might feel grief for the person you could have been if you'd had the courage to be authentic sooner. This rage and grief are not obstacles to your transformation. They are the fuel for it. Let yourself feel the full weight of what you've lost by living as someone else's version of who you should be. But here's the paradox that Nietzsche understood so clearly. The death of your false self is also the greatest gift you can give to the world. When you stop trying to be what everyone else needs you to be, you become what the world actually needs, a unique expression of human consciousness, irreplaceable and invaluable. Your authentic self has gifts that your false self never could have offered. Your real voice has things to say that your performed voice never would have dared. Your true heart has love to give that your guarded heart kept locked away. The real you is born when you finally understand that you don't need permission to be yourself. You don't need unanimous approval for your choices. You don't need to justify your authentic expression to people who are committed to remaining unconscious. You don't need to make your transformation palatable to those who benefit from your self-betrayal. The real you is born when you choose your own values over inherited expectations, when you trust your inner compass more than external directions, when you would rather be alone and authentic than connected and false. This transformation isn't selfish, it's essential, not just for you but for everyone whose life you touch. When you live authentically, you give others permission to do the same. When you refuse to play roles that diminish your spirit, you show others that they don't have to play those roles either. When you choose truth over convenience, you demonstrate that such choices are possible. Your courage to be real in a world that profits from your performance is a radical act of love. Love for yourself, love for truth, love for the possibility of genuine human connection. The old you dies not through violence or force, but through the gentle, persistent choice to honor what is true, rather than what is expected. It dies when you stop arguing with reality and start embracing your authentic desires. It dies when you realize that the approval you've been seeking from others is nothing compared to the approval you can give yourself. It dies when you understand that your life is not a dress rehearsal, that this is the only chance you get to be fully, completely, unapologetically yourself. And from this death, something magnificent is born. Not a perfect person, not someone without flaws or struggles, but someone real. Someone whose presence has weight because it's authentic. Someone whose words have power because they come from truth. Someone whose love has depth because it's chosen freely rather than performed desperately. The real you is born when you finally stop asking permission to exist and start taking responsibility for how you exist. But let's talk about what this rebirth actually feels like, because it's not what most people expect. It's not a moment of blinding enlightenment where suddenly everything makes sense. It's more like waking up from a dream you didn't even know you were having. You look around at your life and wonder how you got here, how you became so disconnected from your own desires, your own truth. You might feel disoriented at first, like you're seeing colors for the first time after living in black and white. The world looks the same, but you're different, and that difference changes everything. The real you emerges slowly, cautiously, like a wild animal that's been caged for so long it's forgotten how to move freely. You'll find yourself hesitating before you speak, not because you're afraid of judgment, but because you're checking in with yourself. Is this true? Is this mine? Does this reflect who I actually am, or who I think I should be? This internal checking, this constant returning to your center becomes second nature. It's what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to hold both your conscious desires and your unconscious wisdom in the same space and let them inform each other. Nietzsche wrote about the eternal recurrence, the idea that if you had to live your exact same life over and over again for eternity, would you choose it? Would you choose it knowing all the pain, all the struggles, all the moments of doubt and fear? When you're living as your authentic self, the answer becomes yes. Not because life becomes easier. Authentic living is often more challenging than performance, but because every experience, even the difficult ones, feels real. You're no longer watching your life happen. You're living it. You're no longer a character in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. This transformation affects every relationship in your life, and not always in ways that feel good initially. Some people will feel uncomfortable with your new authenticity because it highlights their own inauthenticity. They might accuse you of being selfish, of changing too much, of becoming someone they don't recognize. And in a way, they're right. You have become someone new, not because you've added anything foreign to yourself, but because you've stripped away everything that wasn't truly you. It's like removing layers of paint from an antique piece of furniture to reveal the beautiful wood underneath. The wood was always there, but it had been hidden for so long that people forgot its natural beauty. Your relationships will reorganize themselves around your authenticity. Some connections will deepen in ways you never thought possible, because you're finally meeting each other as real people, rather than as carefully curated versions of yourselves. Other relationships will fade naturally, not through conflict or drama, but through the simple recognition that they were based on mutual performance rather than genuine connection. This isn't a failure, it's a clarification. You're finally seeing which relationships nourish your soul, and which ones drain it, which conversations inspire growth and which ones keep you stuck in old patterns. In your professional life, this transformation can be equally profound and unsettling. You might find that the career you've built no longer fits who you're becoming. The skills you've developed might feel hollow if they're not aligned with your authentic interests and values. This is where many people get scared and try to retreat back to the familiar territory of their old selves. The bills still need to be paid after all. The responsibilities still exist. But here's what Nietzsche understood that most people miss. Authentic action is far more powerful and effective than performed action. When you're operating from your true self, you bring a level of creativity, passion, and insight that your false self never could access. The death of your old self often involves grieving relationships that never really existed. You realize that many of your connections were based on mutual enabling, on shared unconsciousness, on the comfort of not having to grow or change. You might grieve the version of your parents who existed only in your fantasies, the friends who loved your performance but couldn't handle your reality, the romantic partners who fell in love with your potential rather than your actuality. This grief is necessary and sacred. You're not just mourning what you've lost, you're making space for what's trying to be born. Jung understood that this process of psychological death and rebirth happens not just once, but repeatedly throughout a conscious life. Each time you reach a new level of self-awareness, parts of your old identity must die to make room for who you're becoming. It's like shedding skin, necessary, natural, but sometimes uncomfortable. You might find yourself outgrowing belief systems that once provided comfort, friendships that once felt essential, dreams that once seemed important, but now feel like someone else's aspirations wearing your name. The real you is born when you stop trying to heal your childhood wounds by recreating them in your adult relationships. You stop choosing partners who withhold love in familiar ways, friends who diminish your light in comfortable patterns, jobs that undervalue your contributions in recognizable rhythms. Instead, you begin to choose experiences that nourish rather than deplete, relationships that inspire rather than drain, opportunities that align with your values rather than just your fears or financial needs. This isn't about becoming perfect or pain-free. The real you still experiences hurt, disappointment, fear, anger. But these emotions move through you differently when you're authentic. They don't get stuck in the same places because you're not using the same defense mechanisms, the same numbing strategies, the same avoidance patterns. Your emotions become information rather than evidence of your inadequacy. Your struggles become opportunities for growth rather than confirmation that you're not enough. Nietzsche spoke of becoming an Übermensch, often translated as Superman or Overman. But what he really meant was becoming a person who creates their own values, rather than inheriting them unconsciously. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of others' wisdom. It means developing the capacity to evaluate inherited beliefs, cultural expectations, family traditions through the filter of your own authentic experience. Some of these inherited patterns will align with who you truly are, and you'll choose to keep them consciously. Others will feel foreign to your spirit, and you'll have the courage to release them with gratitude for how they served you when you needed them. The process of authentic becoming requires what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. You must be strong enough to stand alone while remaining open to genuine connection. You must be confident in your own truth while staying curious about others' perspectives. You must be rooted in your values while remaining flexible in your methods. You must honor your needs without becoming narcissistic. Express your truth without becoming rigid. Pursue your dreams without abandoning compassion for others who are still finding their way. Your authentic self has a different relationship with failure and success than your performed self did. When you're living authentically, failure becomes feedback rather than identity. Success becomes gratitude rather than validation. You stop measuring your worth by external metrics and start evaluating your life by internal ones. Are you growing? Are you contributing something meaningful? Are you living in alignment with your deepest values? Are you showing up as fully yourself in your relationships and work? These become the questions that matter. The death of your old self often involves confronting the ways you've been complicit in your own imprisonment. You realize that while external circumstances certainly influence your choices, you also have more power than you've been willing to acknowledge. You've been choosing safety over growth, comfort over truth, approval over authenticity. This realization can be humbling and empowering simultaneously. Humbling because you see how much time you've spent waiting for permission that was never going to come. Empowering because you realize that if you've been unconsciously choosing limitation, you can consciously choose expansion. The real you is born when you finally understand that your life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. You stop trying to figure everything out in advance and start trusting your ability to navigate whatever arises. You develop what Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate, not because everything that happens is good, but because everything that happens is part of your unique human experience. You begin to see that even your mistakes, your struggles, your periods of confusion have contributed to who you're becoming. They've developed capacities in you that could not have been developed any other way. This transformation changes how you relate to time itself. The old you was always living in the past or the future, replaying old wounds, or anxiously planning for potential problems. The real you learns to inhabit the present moment more fully because that's where life actually happens. You begin to notice things you've been too distracted to see. The way light moves across your wall in the afternoon, the particular sound of your friend's laugh, the feeling of your own breath moving in and out of your body. These simple awarenesses become sources of joy and grounding that your performed self never had access to. Your creativity explodes when you stop trying to create what you think others want and start expressing what's authentically alive in you. Whether your creative expression is professional or personal, artistic or practical, it carries a different energy when it's coming from your true self. It has what Jung called numinosity, a quality of presence that touches something deep in others because it's emerging from something deep in you. You stop worrying about whether your creative expression is good enough and start focusing on whether it's true enough. The real you is born when you realize that you don't need to wait for perfect conditions to start living authentically. You don't need to have all your fears resolved, all your traumas healed, all your relationships sorted out before you can begin showing up as yourself. Authenticity is not a destination you arrive at. It's a practice you engage in moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. Each time you choose truth over performance, you strengthen your authentic self. Each time you honor your needs without apology, you make it easier to do so again. Each time you speak from your depth rather than your surface, you access more of that depth. This is your invitation to let the old you die so the real you can finally, fully, come alive. Not someday when you're ready, not eventually when conditions are perfect, but now, in this moment, with whatever awareness and courage you currently possess. The death of who you thought you were is the birth of who you actually are. And who you actually are is exactly what this world needs, exactly what your relationships are hungry for, exactly what your soul has been waiting for you to become brave enough to express. The real you is not hiding somewhere in the future waiting to be discovered. The real you is here now, waiting to be welcomed home.